So welcome everybody. I'm Stuart Elford. I'm the Chief Executive of Devon and Plymouth Chamber of Commerce. Thanks all for joining us, and thanks for our panelists for coming. Before I say anything else, I must thank our sponsor. So the sponsor of our Chamber Live events is Enterprise Solutions from the University of Plymouth, who very kindly paid for us to have our professional Zoom package so we can do these things. And I'm very grateful to them because like all of your businesses at the moment, I guess any support is much needed. Normally at this point of a meeting, I'd say things like, we're not expecting a fire alarm and the exits are there and there. But if you don't know where you're going when the exit goes off, I'm afraid I can't help you. You're on your own if the alarm goes off. I'll just give a very quick update about Zoom. In fact, there's somebody waiting to come in. I'll admit them now. So for those who haven't used Zoom before or aren't aficionados, I'd never even heard of Zoom about a month ago, and now I claim to be the world's expert. So hopefully, depending on which platform you're using, you should be able to see a panel that says chat. And if you click on that, you'll see there's a little chat box, and you can either send a group chat to everybody, so we can all see it, or you can select someone and privately chat. So for example, if you wanted to ask a question but were embarrassed to ask it yourself or didn't know whether it was a valuable question to ask, send it to me privately, and I will ask it on everyone's behalf and try to remember and notice that it was private and not ask the embarrassing question. We've got another person I'm just admitting now. There we go. The other thing is there's a raise hand function. So if you want to speak, raise your hand, not a physical hand, although if you're really struggling and wave at the camera, I might see you. And do that, but there will be a raise hand function, and it should pop up on my screen that there's a raise hand function. Ollie Jackman's showing off that he's found the reactions function where you can do a thumbs up, or I will give him applause. There we go. Well done. So you can react to things as it's being said. I have muted everyone just so that we don't get background noise or embarrassing sounds of dogs in my case, or kids, or whatever else you've got going on in your lives back there. So I think that's everything on Zoom. If you want to unmute yourselves to ask a question or so, please do. It's just helpful if you could remute yourself. If not, don't be offended if I do it, because otherwise we just get all that background noise. So we've got about 40 people on the call now, which is great. So what I'm going to do now is ask the guests to introduce themselves one by one. That's sorry, I said guests, the panelists. We'll be here all day if we all introduce ourselves. So you feel free, if you feel particularly that you want to introduce yourself, you can. But and then what we're going to do is do a Q&A. And at the end of it, I want to come back to you about what you want from us, your chamber. So in the back of your mind, while you're listening to this, do think about what else the chamber can do to support you. And oh, sorry, on that, Helen will tell me off if I don't do this. I ought to give you just a very quick update about what we've been doing as the Chamber of Commerce. We have been lobbying really hard on business' behalf to get the support packages that you need and deserve. And in fact, the furlough scheme was as a direct result of campaigning through British Chambers of Commerce. So we're very pleased with that. We knew that there would be gaps in the system, and the government were doing this on a way of doing it with the sort of biggest percentages it would cover. So the biggest percentage of people are employed. So the furlough scheme was first. Then it was the self-employed income support scheme, SAYS. And CBILS, the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. And again, we campaigned, lobbied hard to get that extended and to get the banks to play ball and remove the request for personal guarantees, because many of the banks were applying their usual risk-averse policy of lending money to people who can prove they don't need it. And then we were also campaigning now for directors of limited companies to get support, because of course they've fallen foul of the fact they're not in the PAYE scheme, nor are they self-employed. So we are going to continue to campaign for those, especially who've fallen through the gaps. And we're continuing to ask government to plug those gaps, but also ensure that there is clarity and speed of delivery for all of these support systems. So The HMRC portal has gone live this morning for the furlough scheme, the CJRS, Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme. It is already experiencing technical difficulties, as we imagined it would. But to be fair to HMRC, they have produced a massive job. They've produced a website, a portal that is relatively simple to use. We're already finding there are some gaps in it where it's not clear how you deal with putting in a claim where you've furloughed different members of staff at different times during the month, because it'll only allow you to do one application, so you can't do two with different dates in it. But when you put in an application, it's only got one date in it. But they will get through these things, and I've been on conference calls with HMRC who've been really, really robust and positive about how the amount of resource they're throwing at this to make sure that the cash gets to you on the front line as soon as possible. So keep thinking about what else you want us to campaign for, what else you want to do. Examples you give us go direct to government. And in fact, an example from Devon Chamber of Commerce landed on the desk of Rishi Sunak and was used to change policy. So don't feel that you can't have a say, that you are completely on your own. This is showing the power of being a member of an accredited Chamber of Commerce. You get your voice directly into government. So where you've got an issue, let us know, and we'll do what we can, anything we can, to support you. So without further ado, I will come back to that question at the end. If I forget, Helen or Olivia will no doubt remind me, send me a WhatsApp or something that'll ping and tell me that I'm an idiot and I've forgotten to come back to that as to what your issues are. But without further ado, I will hand over to our panelists who'll just give a sort of 2 to 3 minute introduction to themselves, their organizations, what they do as an organization, and how they can support you. So we'll start off with Tom Godwin, and if you don't mind unmuting yourself first, Tom.
Hi everyone, my name is Tom Godwin. I have 2 roles within Citizens Advice across the region. We, across Devon, have got 32 locations we normally give advice out of, with 200 staff and 500 volunteers. And we've, like many of you, moved to an online way of working. We've been seeing a 19% increase in the number of phone calls and 47% increase in the amount of web chat for advice that we give on a wide range of issues, from anything from benefits to consumer to immigration, all the way through to supporting people with applications for our help to claim for universal credit. So we're kind of one of the many advice charities in the region that are obviously very busy, and obviously working in partnership with some of the other people who are on this Zoom today, such as our colleagues in the DWP and other advice charities, to try and pick up some of the people who've fallen through the gaps and try and make things work better for them moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And Carla, perhaps you could come in there and tell us about yourself and your organisation.
Certainly. So hi everybody, I'm Carla White. I am an employee advisor manager for Devonport and for Plymouth Job Centre. I am currently working from home remotely and supporting universal credit for the customers' intake. And as you can appreciate, with the coronavirus, the unprecedented time for the amount of claims that we've received, and to give you a flavour of that, I've got some figures here. So in our totality of our caseload for universal credit for JSA, prior to COVID, we received in 1 month. So therefore, the amounts that we are working on and trying to drive through virtually, because obviously nobody is allowed into the job centre, we are working relentlessly to push that through. So I'm going to be here today to take questions away. If there's some technical questions with anybody, whether it's with their staff or with their work, and to see if there's anything that I can do to support you from the job centre point of view.
Thank you, Carla. And just a silly question from my own point of view. If the job centres are shut, if people don't have access to the internet, they must be struggling. I mean, do you take telephone inquiries, postal? How do you deal with those sort of people?
Well, the lines of action is that if they must be contactable, they must be able to go out to speak to somebody to actually obtain like the citizens' advice, or to access it that way through a telephone call. So they can contact us. It doesn't have to be virtually, and then we will be able to basically do everything and contact the customer. But it's actually to prevent them from coming into the job centre.
Okay, thank you. I see, Gary, you've got your hand up. Is that a specific question for Carla, or do you want to come to the Q&A at the end?
I'll come in at the end anyway. We have got one of our job centres open, Plymouth Job Centre. We've got one area which is open to the public for the vulnerable customers, so we can see people. But the majority of people we're not seeing for, we've cancelled all interviews for the next 3 months. So we're not calling anybody in at this present moment in time. But there is an area where we can see people who, do drop in. But we're not seeing many people now. We did initially, but not seeing as many now.
Okay, Gary, and it was your turn anyway, so you better come in there, introduce yourself fully, and tell us what you're doing.
Gary Martin. I'm working in Plymouth Old Street Court Job Centre, but I sort of cover West Devon, South Ham, and Plymouth. I'm in the sort of partnership team, so we work with other agencies for the good of people who may use the job centre. So met Tom on many occasions. I've been involved in the rollout of Universal Credit for the last couple of years. So it's been live in Plymouth for a couple of years now. But as Carla hinted, the numbers that we've been getting through over the last sort of 4 weeks has been, huge. So everything's changed. We've pulled all resources in to make sure we process everybody correctly. We're doing everything virtually. We could be dealing with claims from anywhere in the country just to make sure that we're contacting the people themselves at home rather than them having to get through our 0800 numbers in order to access our services. So we are, working hard to make sure everybody's sort of paid on time, because like the majority of people who've made their claims have never sort of engaged with the Department of Work and Pensions in this way before. As sort of general figures go, up to January, we had 2.8 million people nationally on Universal Credit. And over the last 4 weeks, we've had 1.4 million people make claims. So it has been a real sort of move in order to get these people sort of processed as quickly as possible. So yeah,
that's an additional 1.4 million.
And it's 1.4 million. Yeah. So like the numbers involved have been huge. So they basically pulled out all stops in order to get people processed as quickly as possible. It has been, it's phenomenal. The staff have been amazing.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And are you planning for a surge again? Because there's a feeling through the coronavirus impact tracker that British Chambers of Commerce are doing that there's a real pinch point coming up now in the next week with the salary run for April.
Right.
But by the salary run for May, we're expecting another surge in businesses saying that they can't pay and will potentially be going under.
Well, we've got the processes in place. Obviously, like we've examined every process that we've had in order to streamline it. So we don't see people individually, but the different ways of collecting and verifying information for their claims. So I would say we are prepared for it. I haven't seen any numbers myself, but equally we've taken to sort of minimise people having to make sort of new claims. A lot of the people who made their claims might have made their claims a bit early, so they might have say received wages, their last wages, within the period of claiming Universal Credit. And we always take Universal Credit as a means tested benefit. We always take it into account. So normally we'd shut those claims down, but we won't be shutting those claims down on the sort of first assessment periods anymore. We're going to let it run and make sure that, see how their wages go and settle. So, we've got processes in place just to take into account most eventualities.
Okay. And Carla, I think you want to come in there on that, do you?
Yeah, just to say for the preparation side of things. So in the background, what's been happening is that we have a virtual team of over 800 people in the Southwest who are working remotely from home, who have been having training and working through in preparation for any of the surges and any of the payments, so that we can make sure that we can get to everybody at the time that they're due. So we are prepared now. So we've had the initial intake come in, and we've managed to try to drive that down. Now we're preparing for the next wave. And for what's actually going to be happening with payments that are moving on to the next stage of it.
Okay, thank you, Carla. So I think we're now on to Jacob Coburn from the Economic Development team at Devon County Council. And if you want to at this time, Jacob, also ask a question that you've got at the end of your bit. Just before you speak, I must pay tribute to your team, who have been absolutely unbelievable in pulling out the stops to get business support out as quick. I've never seen a council act so fast or go so far, nor have I seen them reshape their team to deliver the sort of support they have. So I really must pay tribute to you, City Council, particularly the Economic Development team, and thank you for the partnership working that we've had, which is much appreciated. So Jacob, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm the Senior Economic Development Officer for Skills and Education. Obviously, as you've just alluded to, Stuart, things have reshaped very, very quickly. So though my job is starting to become more about skills and education, for the past month, really, it's been looking at the economic position and as a whole, really, and how I play into that. So I've picked up, I also should have said that I also work for the LEP, for the Hearts of the Southwest LEP. So we've now created a part of the website that will be a skills and jobs opportunity for people. So there'll be training opportunities, there'll be links to vacancies, there'll be links onto the Growth Hub, and as a one-stop page for anybody who's been made redundant to see all of the options that are available to them. So not just job opportunities, but kind of, yeah, be able to access all of the options. What we've been doing really as a whole for the past month is seeing how we can grab as much data as we can, how we can turn that around as quickly as possible into solid reports, and then feed that through to the various government sources that we've got, so that we can make this transition, that when we come out of lockdown, as smooth as possible, and really kind of reshape elements of the economy as they will need to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there a question you wanted to ask of
Yeah,
people?
and my question is, we know that jobs are going to come online, and when they're going to come online, they might be in new fields of, and they might be in new ways. We'd be really interested in people making us aware of those opportunities so that we can start to look at what that transition is, because we realise that a lot of people are going to have to go sideways into new jobs, and there's going to be skills gaps. There's going to be also people who are able to make those transitions anyway, who are unaware that their skills match. So if at any point anybody suddenly comes aware of potentially growing sectors, we'd be really keen at the council and the LEP to know about that, so that we can then try and support those gaps and bring other people into play to enable that transition.
Right. And at the moment, what do you think are the growing ones? I mean, I flippantly said before, or as this was starting, that you want to invest in companies that do hand sanitizer and online video conferencing. But I mean, in all seriousness, what are those? What are you seeing so far? What do you think are going to be?
I think the food sector will see an expansion, and we've put in for an awful lot of funding around that. I think you're also realistically looking at a massive jump in digital. I mean, companies are doing. I've said this so many times. Companies that for 3 years have been threatening to become digitally literate are doing it in 2 months, something that would take them 3 years. And what will come out of that is a realization that they need to expand their workforce in that area. I think the other thing that we're going to see probably coming out of that as well is going to be an awful lot of transition into potential engineering opportunities that come out of our needs for the equipment for the new world, as we start to look at trying to keep stuff in Britain, so that we're not having to wait for such a long period of time as we have done for an awful lot of things, because it's cheaper to make it abroad, when actually it's fundamental that nowadays, with what we've seen, that we're able to make a 24-hour decision to increase productivity, which we've just been unable to do.
It is interesting. I mean, isn't it? Funny is the wrong word. I'm sorry, but interesting that, as you say, since I've been at the Chamber, it's 18 months now, I've been saying we should look at digitising our events, about recording them, about doing video, going online. Well, 6 weeks ago, I'd never heard of Zoom. Now I'm the world's expert. You know, it's funny how necessity makes you look at what you're doing.
I would say on that front that I run an awful lot, chair an awful lot of meetings where I probably have about a 70% attendance, and that attendance now is in the high 90s.
Yeah, we found exactly the same. We had a Plymouth Area Business Council board meeting, and it was the first time I think we've had a full house, whereas before, sorry, Paul Burton, you're a swine. He's deliberately putting me off. He's just WhatsApped me to laugh at me calling myself a world's expert on Zoom, because I am clearly not. So that's thrown me completely. Anyway, we were going over to Paul Fox next from the Government Money and Pensions Service, MAPS. Paul, do you want to introduce yourself and what you're doing?
I will indeed, Stuart. Thank you. Thank you very much for the invite to attend this afternoon. I'm really delighted. I'm only slightly gutted that I had several trips to Devon arranged for this coming month, and now obviously I will aim to do those come a later date. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm the head of the Government's Money and Pensions Service for the southwest of England. A lot of you may not have heard of MAPS, as we're referred to, but we are the government statutory body that is tasked with improving financial well-being across the United Kingdom. Really looking at how people can make the most of their money throughout their lives, and also things like their pensions and so forth. I joined the organisation at the beginning of January, and with deep joy, a month later, obviously C19 popped on. The Money and Pension Service, the reason I'm here is that it's my role to engage with organisations and business, both in public and private sector across the southwest, so that we can try and understand how MAPS can support your organisations, your businesses, your employees, your friends and your families and so forth, with a broad range of tools and guidance and support across a whole range of financial well-being matters that we've got. So I was kindly invited by Stuart to join the panel today. I can't give individual advice, that's a regulatory activity, but I can point any of you in the direction of some very, very good independent guidance. It may be a benefit to you personally, maybe to your employees, maybe to the wider organisations that you run or are involved with. And if I can't particularly answer anything specific today, please do get in contact with me afterwards, and I will certainly come back to you and point you in the right direction.
Thank you, Paul. I don't know if there's a question you can answer, but what's pensions automatic enrolment at this time, especially under the furlough scheme? Am I right in thinking that the HMRC will only pay the statutory minimum of what is of automatic enrolment?
There's information been swirling for about 4-6 weeks on this, really, and I think it depends on which newspaper you read or which media outlet you go to. You know, at the moment, on the one hand, we've got, yes, I agree with that statement from you, but on the other hand, you know, you've got stories coming into the papers this morning that several large organisations, for example, who need to be paying millions into their pension schemes over the next few years, are going to be withholding those for the time being. I don't think the government's going to be very happy about it. I don't think HMRC will be very happy about it. In terms of auto enrolment, there was some talk a few weeks ago about having an effective 6-month hiatus on that. However, as I understand the argument coming out of government, already there are people starting to look at their own pension pots, and if they're over 55 and they can access them under the rules that came out 4 or 5 years ago, the government is worried that people are going to start tapping pension pots now because they have a short-term financial issue. which is only going to kick some financial crises down the line. And I think the same is true with auto enrollment. I don't think they will want to do anything, because if anything, since auto enrollment came in, the take up has been a lot higher than the government ever expected it to be, i.e. less people have opted out than they ever thought. And they are not going to want to jeopardize that. So at the moment, I don't think that will be too heavily impacted.
No, and it's interesting you say that. I've seen my pensions take a plummet in value, and I'm glad I'm not just about to come up for retirement, because that must be a very worrying time for people. Let's hope that pensions do what they're supposed to do over the long term, which is climb back up. Just before I throw it open to questions from everyone, and please ask some questions. My fear with all these things is there's a stony silence, but could I just take a bit of a straw poll around the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme, CBILS? I don't want to sort of preempt this, but in fact, I won't. I'll just ask, and if you don't want to answer because it's private, don't. But sort of a show of hands using the reaction button if you can. Is there anyone who's actually taken advantage of it or applied for it? So if you see reactions down there, if you put your thumb up if you have applied, or you're going to apply, or your business has applied for CBILS. So either nobody knows how to put their thumbs up, or not a single person on the call has. No. Okay. So what reminded me of this, Paul, was your comment there. Actually, is my feeling. Oh, so Andrew's got his thumbs up there. Thank you. My concern with CBILS is that it is a loan which is all right for a small selection of businesses that have a growth trajectory and are able to recoup the revenue they've lost during this time. My fear with CBILS is there are people borrowing money in a falling market with no recovery plan, taking on debt, so that when they come out the other side, there is no ability to recoup the revenue you've lost. So if you're making widgets and the things the widgets go in aren't being made at the moment, when you come out the other side, the demand stays the same. You don't go back and resupply all the widgets you were trying to ask. So I just have a concern that we're kind of storing things up for the future. And thank you for someone's pointed out to me that there were 2 pages. I did flick between the two screens. I couldn't see many hands up, but I just think my worry is that with CBILS, we're borrowing money which is going to cause problems further down the line. And I think this is why it's interesting to have all you guys, you panelists on now, because I suspect there's going to be a fair degree of picking up the pieces later on. So I'm submitting someone else to the call. So any questions for our panelists at this time? And hopefully I will see some hands go up, some virtual hands or some actual hands. Deathly silence. Oh my God. This was my fear. I hate that. You've obviously all covered everything so well. So
Tom Godwin has made a point on the chat, which I think could be
thank you.
Covered a bit more detail.
Yeah, you lead on that, Helen.
No, I was just going to ask Tom if he would expand on what you were just putting on the chat.
Yeah, I was just picking up on Paul's comment about pensions, just to put some stuff in the chat around the pension-wise service that's still operating via phone and online, where people over 50 can make sense of their options around pension pots. And we would strongly urge, as I'm just echoing Paul's comments really, around people, that it is a difficult time, and pension pots may seem an appealing option, and for some people that may be the right decision, but they should really be aware that that service exists for them to consider their options and make sense of what they can, because I think we're obviously quite concerned around that. And also, just to be another sort of point while we're here, is just to say that obviously I work with lots of colleagues across the country for citizens' advices, and I just think it's really important that we kind of, everyone in the community around here is aware of this, and I say this quite regularly, that we're really fortunate here by how joined up a lot of us are. So Gary and I have spent lots of times in meetings. We have a really good relationship in supporting people in this region. I'm aware that in other regions, for example, the local advice charities have no relationship with some of their DWP counterparts to try and help get advice out there and support people and chat, find out how they can best help each other. So we are fortunate in this region that, because where things have always been a little bit more difficult for us in certain ways down here, and we have to work together, that actually we have really good structures and relationships to try and support people and refer people, and it's our big message to people, if you've got employees struggling or family members, is to seek some advice early doors and discuss your options, because we're well placed, not just us, but other advice charities and other government and councils, to really support properly in terms of signposting people to the right areas. And I think that's a really important comment, that there's a lot of great work happening post-COVID of people pulling together, but a lot of that was already happening before in terms of advice in the region, and we're really strongly working together already to try and support people through the cracks, who've fallen through the cracks, sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. I do worry that we save up a problem for later. So question, I guess, for the guys from DWP, are we seeing sectors at the moment? Are you seeing particular, well, Jacob, you might also come in on this. Are we seeing rapidly claims coming in from particular sectors? What are those that are hardest hit first? Where are my DWP guys? Are you able to say what you're seeing claims coming in?
It's Gary.
Gary,
no, we don't. We haven't even seen sort of figures about the numbers locally with regards to the impact of C19. So I don't know that that analysis is taking place. So
no. I think it's early doors.
Online, we're not seeing people through the door, so we're not picking up that sort of soft information either.
Mm. And Jacob, are you seeing any in the economic development team? Are you seeing sectoral problems?
Yeah, so we are seeing that the areas that we're seeing is obviously retail, specifically high street retail, that without people being able to go in is going under. We've obviously got an ongoing issue because of the way that our economy works around tourism, and I mean that is a major concern for us going forward, because I mean it's unlikely that there's going to be any kind of money coming in. I think there was a number along the lines of maybe £1 billion already being wiped out of the Devon-wide economy through that. There would also be concerns around the fisheries as well, because a lot of their work goes outside. A lot of their product, goes outside of Britain, and it's not wanted, to be fairly honest. There's also then worries when we're looking at it around kind of food distribution and food itself, around restaurants not needing that quantity. And we've seen it with milk, haven't we, recently? Like, some farmers have done really well out of this process, and some are really struggling because of who their client base is. Yeah. So that's just picking up probably 3 or 4 was that there that are standing out at the moment. Our bigger worry as a piece is what happens when we come out of lockdown. Will government put their hand in their pocket continually after this to support that transition back into the real world? Because businesses, as you alluded to earlier, Stuart, just because you can work doesn't mean you've got the equipment needed to be able to push production back up to where it was. Doesn't mean that people want the product that you were selling previously. There's going to be a transition piece that needs to happen out the back end of this to support businesses, to ensure that they've given the best opportunity to ramp up as needed to the place that they were previously. Otherwise, companies will make redundancies or will go to the wall. We've done some financial modelling, which some worst case scenario stuff that is horrendous, but in our head, we're looking about 5.5% of people in Devon are redundant at the moment, and we're looking at that realistically, and this is out there. This is a piece of work that we put out about 2 or 3 weeks ago. The percentage number we have in our head is between 12 and 13% of people being redundant in Devon at the end of this process.
Yeah, that is a frightening statistic. There's a few things to say there. One is the chamber itself will help over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at helping businesses as they come out the other side. So we'll be looking at events to help you think about how you ramp back up, how you manage your cash flow through that, how you manage your workload, how you manage your workforce. British Chambers of Commerce are also telling government that this isn't a switch it on, switch it off thing. It's going to take time to ramp back up. And that leads me on to the thought about manufacturing. Some manufacturers have come in for a lot of flack about keeping their manufacturing plants running. And I understand that. I understand the sentiment, and I understand the emotion. And I was one of those thinking, I'm not sure you can justify keeping that factory ticking over. However, in the manufacturing sector, I'm told that it's a bit like furloughing a ship. The Navy put ships into sort of furlough. It takes 6 months to get them out of furlough. It takes 6 months to get a Navy ship from being in sort of dry dock, shut down, to actually up and fighting again. So it's the same with manufacturing, with factories, that you don't just turn them on and off. There's supply chain issues, there's training issues, there's just sheer machinery issues. It is not easy to do. So where business can keep ticking along, it's actually safely, then it's the right thing to do. Alexis, I was going to ask you, from a sort of, are you seeing an upsurge in digital, as in requests for people wanting training? I mean, we're all on screen now. We weren't all on screen a month or so ago. So here we are. Are you seeing people wanting to know how they can best promote themselves through the internet and so forth?
Well, that's a very interesting question, actually, because just before this all happened, I'd had a massive upsurge in the number of people who wanted to come on my public speaking courses up at Plymouth Science Park. So we've only missed one of those. So I'm sort of in the process of transferring that whole public speaking training into how to present yourself, or how to get yourself across more meaningfully in this new digital age. I'd be really interested in feedback from people as to whether they'd be interested in me running sessions like that, which I'd be really, really happy to do. But I have to say that the last 3 weeks has been so chaotic, actually, for my business, that I haven't been able to push that forward. But it's something that I've been very seriously considering. I think lots and lots of people have moved into this new Zoom world and are doing a really good job of it, but aren't necessarily as confident as they'd like to be. And that's something that can easily be turned around in half a day.
Okay. Perhaps feedback, anyone on the chat who's interested in that. I've got Michelle Virgo's got her hand up. So Michelle, would you like to ask your question?
Hello, yeah, it was a response to something Jacob was just talking about, actually, around the getting back to work period. Is there any conversation or any work being done locally around making sure that that is steered towards the inclusive and clean growth agendas rather than business as usual?
That's a really good question. We are optimistic that it will not be business as usual. We have had to put forward a proposal to government. As Stuart said, we worked really hard to be first, as one of the first counties off the mark, as it were, because we knew that if we got the numbers in front of government, they would listen. And to be fair to them, they have. We've been feeding information up to them. And a large part of what we've been doing is saying, actually, we can reshape our economy. It doesn't have to be the way it was before. And a big one, as alluded to there, is around food. The whole idea of that circular, localized economy that can generate well-paid jobs, that means that there is much less traveling of food around the world to meet our local need. The fact that we can drive up value in people's wages so they can actually afford to buy that food as well, because we realize that there's a cost implication that comes from that. And that's just one of the examples. And I think you've seen as well with the fact of how businesses have adapted to allowing people to work at home. I don't think we'll see people going to the office as much. And I know for a fact that Devon County Council as a whole, that's a conversation we've had a lot, which is actually, who put your hand up if you've done more work at home than you have in the office, followed by 90% of people putting their hand up and saying, well, maybe this is something we need to do more often. Yeah, it's so. I think it will change. I think the worry coming out the other end around that is how government chooses to use that money to support businesses, because there's clearly businesses that require people to go to the office or go to their place of work. So I think it needs to be a little more targeted than just blanket spend it as you want. But those conversations are being had, yeah.
I think that's really important. That's a very good question, Michelle. I mean, you know, these are opportunities. The opportunities at these times are to reassess the business we do, how we do it, where our focus is. I don't suppose there's a person on this call who hasn't thought this has really made them think about what their business is doing, how they deliver it. You know, we've thought, does the Chamber need a huge, great office? Well, no, it doesn't. We think it does need an office. It needs a focal place. It's good that we've got our meeting room, but does it need more than that? Probably not. Do we all need to work in the office all the time? Probably not. Do we need to think about the delivery of our services online? Definitely. So there's a whole sort of raft of changes of thought about how we actually do business. I'm just going to go to the chat. There's a couple of private questions, and I'll ask the panel about this because it kind of leads on to the next thing. And sorry, there was one other question. I'm just scrolling through it to see if I can. Yeah, I mean, there is a feeling from a few people privately to me that borrowing is tricky at this moment, both in terms of the practicalities of borrowing, accessing this money, but secondly, as in, is there an appetite for it? Do you really want to borrow in this market? And that is worrying. But the question I was going to ask, two people have asked a question of the panel. If you don't feel you can answer it, let me know. But does anyone on the panel have a feeling about how directors can be treated where they have fallen outside of the PAYE scheme because they have paid themselves in dividends, not through any sort of dodgy accounting practice? This is standard accounting practice. It's advice from accountants about how to best manage your financial affairs. But that means that you don't get anything other than the barest a minimum support of what you've paid yourself through PAYE. So any thoughts on that from the panelists about how company directors can access help? Carla, are you, or Gary, you feel you can answer that? Gary?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
This can still make a claim for universal credit, and they're probably going to be treated as self-employed, just for for our purposes. So they would still just need to declare any earnings that they receive or any sort of cost they have at the end of each month. So they could still sort of make a claim at the moment. Basically, everybody who's self-employed at the moment is being treated slightly differently under the C19 sort of regulations at the moment. They're not applying what they call the minimum income floor. So they're not applying any assumed earnings for people who are self-employed at the moment. So, if there's any doubt at all, I would encourage anybody to actually make a claim. And we can discuss it with them then. Just sort of don't hold fire. So yeah, it's.
Is it going to be enough for people? I mean, I've got to be honest. I don't know what. I've never had to claim universal credit, but I'm guessing it's not a lot of money.
It's not very much money, at all. It's just enough to sort of survival. So the standard rate for somebody over the age of 25 for a month is like £410 almost. So it's not very much at all.
No, that is dire. And there's a question on the group chat, and I see it's to everyone. So James Twigger, do you want to come in there and actually raise your concern on here?
It's effectively what you've just been talking about, really. It's where there's a bit of disparity depending on whether an individual decides to trade as a sole trader, self-employed, or as a limited company. They could be earning exactly the same money, but due to the current system, and I do appreciate they've had to roll the system out very quickly, and as I appreciate the kind of the effort the government's gone to get this far, but there is that kind of difference between if you opted to trade as a sole trader and a limited company, and the government don't seem to be doing anything. I appreciate it. So they recommend to go for universal credit. if they need that financial support. But at the moment, yeah, we're seeing a lot of people who are struggling, directors, limited companies, who just aren't able to get any support. And that's also, a lot of them are employers as well, so they furloughed their staff. If a self-employed person can continue to work and get the grants in June, whereas a director of a limited company, if they have to furlough themselves, they can't do anything apart from statutory duty. So yeah, that was just my point really, that there is that difference.
It's a good point, James. And I recall Rishi Sunak saying that there will be a levelling up of taxes after this. I can't remember specifically which example.
I think that was more in relation to self-employed who currently pay a lower percentage for national insurance. So yeah. I think it was an acknowledgement that at the end of this all, the self-employed will probably end up seeing an increase in national insurance from 9% up to more of a similar level to employed people pay.
It'd be interesting to see if that rolls out across a whole bunch of things. I mean, you know, if you ended up where there was no tax advantage one way or another to being self-employed, employed, dividend and what have you, these sort of issues probably wouldn't come up. But we've got a very, very complex tax system with a very complex set of rules that are fine while things are going well, but not when they're not.
Stuart, I would say on that, the conversation in our office has been that obviously the government have been looking to change those regulations for a while, and this new government, and have struggled with that. And is it a surprise that these people are at the back end of the queue? Because maybe there is a little more at play than just we're giving these people this money, because they might well say, well, certain people have been able to have done quite well out of this service for 5 years, and we need to look at what we do as a percentage scale rather than just having a generic here's the mark kind of thing. And so that's what we are thinking is happening, and then a levelling up process at the end of cutting out these gaps that we're speaking of, and everyone paying more generic tax across the piece. So I think it's coming. The problem is they're not so keen to just deliver a generic line of 80%. They'll want to be a bit more careful about who gets what, because there are people, and I totally agree with this, who are maybe 45 grand a year with what they're doing. They pay the same tax as someone on 45 grand a year paying PAYE. But there are certain people who definitely have managed to find loopholes, who are doing pretty well out of it. And maybe now when they're turning around and saying, I want my 80%, the government might want to put a caveat on that.
Yeah, I get that completely. Thomas Godwin wants to come in with a point just while he's about to, and I would say just remind you all, I just need to collate from you before we all disappear in a moment what your issues are that you think still need addressing that I can take to British Chambers of Commerce. Thomas, do come in there. You're muted at the moment. There we go.
This sort of leads on nicely from what you've just said, but picking up on an earlier point is around people who've been self-employed for under a year. Which is a sizable number of people, and things are quite difficult and tricky for those people. And I just kind of want to put another sort of call out there that if you know people in that instance, or people approach around it, to try and get them to engage with an advice charity to look at, because they need to look at multiple options to try and make sure that they have money to survive on each month. And Gary and his team and removing the minimum income floor is really welcome, and that's fantastic. But we're campaigning nationally really hard about the government about this group of people that's quite sizable. I think it's 600,000 across the country at the moment, but we're seeing certainly lots of first year self-employed entrepreneurial people are in Plymouth and Devon who are really struggling to access any support. So if you do know people in that situation, please point them in the direction of an advice charity, because we need to look at multiple ways of trying to bring money in through for them through not just universal credit, but also advising on things like mortgage holidays or rent renegotiations, credit card holidays, and all those kind of things. So it's just a bit of a plea on that front.
That's a very good point, and I know someone who's personally affected by that, and I am currently sitting in their kitchen. So I will I will say that. Paul, did you want to come in on something then?
Yeah, thanks, Stuart. I couldn't find the raise your hand button despite looking for the last 3 minutes.
Actually did
it. I know you pointed it out at the beginning. I suppose really just from a broader point of view, you know, I come from this broadly as a B2C organisation, but the engagement here with business today is absolutely crucial. And I think, you know, you're talking about trends a little bit, Stuart, and I know Jacob and Thomas are touching on a little bit about what sort of sectors and what things might look like, you know, 3-6 months, but also 12, 24, 5 years down the line. And I think something that you're going to find a lot of discussion about is resilience, financial resilience, not just for businesses, but for individuals. We are getting calls into the MAPS call centre, quadrupling up in Scotland, and there are company directors phoning in there in tears, earning 80 grand a year, because they may well be taking home a very good salary on a month-by-month basis, but they have no financial buffer. No. And they may be fantastic at running their businesses, but it doesn't necessarily always mean somebody is equally as competent at managing their own finances. And I think as a country, we're actually going to take a reset in the coming years, and we're going to start educating our population and our youngsters and our younger people and their younger families, get them earlier, understanding more about money and opportunity and debt and credit and how it might impact them through their life. And I think that's a trend. You know, building national resilience is something that we're frankly not very good at. And I think we'll see a lot of that talk over the next few years, Stuart.
Paul, I think that's a superbly eloquent way to draw the conversation to a conclusion. I completely agree with you. I think we've lost the ability to have a war chest for tough times. We have clever accountants saying everything must be just in time because that's lean and efficient. And that's fine when things are good, but we have lost that ability to have the war chest, the larder that we used to have physically and in really, what am I trying to say, literally a larder in your house. We don't have that anymore. We wait till the cupboard is completely bare and then we go to Sainsbury's because it'll always be there. But our parents and grandparents' generations who were brought up through the wars, they knew how to be resilient, unlike some of us. I just wanted to, just before I come to what your issues still are, someone sent me a private message about what a statutory duty is for company directors. And this was a discussion that was held with British Chambers of Commerce. And if that person wants to get in touch with me, I'm quite happy to talk about that. I mean, there is a feeling that you can argue just as a company director, just about anything you do is a statutory duty if it's keeping the company going and complying with any sort of legal obligation. Just before I thank the speakers and round up, is there anybody either on the chat or by raising hand who wants to say any issues that we as a chamber should be addressing, anything you want us to do either as in taking to government as a direct piece of lobbying, or as in events you'd like us to hold, information you'd like us to share? If there's a deathly silence, it means we're doing such a fantastic job that there's not a single thing you want us to do for you. But are there any gaps, any issues?
I'd be interested, Stuart, and this is an off the cuff one, so I do apologise, for government to know if government are looking at supporting businesses around mental health issues when people come back off being furloughed, because I don't think it's going to be as smooth for people to make that adjustment. I mean, we're seeing it with schools already. We're having a conversation with schools that goes along the lines of my child's best friends' parents are doctors and nurses. Do I want them to be in the same school as them just because you've told me that's the case? And I presume it's going to be a similar thing in businesses. I know that my mate's husband or wife is a nurse. They're in a dangerous situation. Do I want to go back to the same place of work as them? I think there's going to, I'd be interested to know if the government are already, from businesses' perspective, because they'll need bums on seats. So there needs to be some thought about how you support people back to the workplace. Be interesting to hear about that.
That's a really interesting question, Jacob. I mean, I had never realised the impact this is having on people's mental health until very recently, and I've seen some direct examples of that. I think it'll be a very interesting time, and it won't be just I'll go back to work and it'll all be fine. I think there's going to be some difficult times with people's mental health, and I will take that forward. I'll take that both up to government through British Chambers of Commerce, but I'll also consider how we as a chamber, when we're looking at helping businesses come out the other side of this, deal with the people challenge of getting people safely and securely back to work. So Alexis is waving at me. She's either saying goodbye or she wants to come in. So I was going to make, and I'll be honest, I was going to make a very flippant remark about how the fact that Alexis' background had changed a couple of times. And at one point it looked like she was going to actually jump off the Tamar Bridge, but now she's standing between the two. So I'm assuming that she's okay. Did you want to come in on something, or were you just waving goodbye, Alexis?
Sort of gap.
You were muted. I've unmuted you. Start again.
Unmuted me. So there is a gap, an interesting gap, catch-22 gap, that has been highlighted for me with the people that I sort of tend to network with, which is that there isn't there's a double bind going on with people who have got children and who the children are not going back to school. So if you've lost your job and you're in a position where you're trying to find work at the moment, even if you're going to be working from home, people who have children at home are therefore having to do two jobs. So they're unpaid teachers, and at the same time they're not able to get out. There's no childcare. You know, until these kids start going back to school, your economic workforce is completely handcuffed and unpaid and unable to get a job.
Yes, I have a friend in that very position who was telling me yesterday, how can she even find work while she's at home looking after kids? But
also the onus is on the adult in the household to have transmogrified into a teacher and an unpaid teacher. And even if you're meant to be at home working, you've also simultaneously been given this extra level of responsibility and work on top of that. So it's a handcuffing of the economic potential of the population.
Yeah, I completely get that. So I better wrap up there. There's a couple of quick things to say. One is our own event next week is around skills, training, things that people can do whilst they're furloughed, online and so forth. And that's for people who are either furloughed or unemployed. What training and skills are available? So please join our live event there. I should have said at the start, please tweet, blog, post, and otherwise share #ChamberLive, and hopefully give us a good score out of 10 for this one and say it was helpful. I hope it was. If there are any subjects you want us to take up on your behalf, please come back to me. And just before I wrap up, has anybody got any questions, anything they want to say? Oh, I did promise Ollie Jackman I would mention he has an event. I'm just scrolling up to see if I can find it. Ollie, are you on the call? If you are, unmute yourself and tell us.
Hello. Yeah, I'm back.
Hi.
I had some daddy daycare duties to attend to, sorry.
That's all right. You've got 30 seconds. Go. Tell us about your event.
Tomorrow at 11, the Regional Cybercrime Unit and a industry-leading cybersecurity specialist and I are hosting a 1-hour session on, they've been doing loads of research on how COVID-19's affected cybercrime. So if it sounds fun to you, then you can't get out more, so why don't you join us?
Thank you. I'm just checking a message that's come in. Yes, Paul, thank you very much for putting your contact details on there. That's really appreciated. I'm going to do a very rare thing, which is going to seem very strange for us all to do. I'm going to unmute everyone. And when we say goodbye, which will be about now, could we just thank our panelists for joining us with a round of applause?
Thank you.
Virtual round of applause. Thank you very much, guys. Really appreciate you joining us, and I hope we'll see you soon.